Well, welcome to the podcast, the Taproom Podcast, where anything goes and interesting conversations are always on tap. So tonight we have a very special guest. This is my friend. I wouldn't say necessarily a good friend yet, but we've become friends over the past couple of years. He's good friends with my mom, who many of you know was January 6th so-called insurrectionist and stormed the Capitol. Very, very dangerous criminal, if you will. So, but good friends with my mom. Todd Watkins, he is I've been involved in politics in Colorado for a number of years, but the reason I wanted to have him on tonight is he is a former assistant chief to, let me get this right, assistant chief, U.S. Border Patrol.
Correct.
Is that correct? Did I say that
yes,
right?
Sir.
Okay, well, awesome. So Todd knows a little bit about what's going on in our country right now. Of course, if you've been watching the news at all, you see that there's lots of unrest going on in Los Angeles, downtown Los Angeles, and to my understanding is being planned in other places around the country as we speak. That being said, welcome, Todd. Thanks for coming on tonight.
Thank you, Michael. I haven't talked to your mom in a while. How's she doing?
She's doing good. She's actually staying with my sister right now in D.C. and
No, thanks.
Just interestingly enough, now that she's allowed to go back, so
tell her to steer
well.
clear of the insurrections in D.C. that are bound to happen this week.
Absolutely, yeah. It's funny. She tells me that the story that when she tells her story about how she got involved with J6, she tells everybody it's my fault because I called and asked if she wanted to go, and she said initially she said no, and then I asked her to pray about it, and of course she drove 25 hours and got involved. And so this morning I actually called her and said, "Hey Mom, do you want to go to LA and check out these protests?" And she goes, "No, I don't even know what's going on." I said, "Well, just pray about it." So of course I was kidding because I didn't want to drive the 16 hours, but yeah, she's doing well. Thanks for asking. Yeah. And she had her ankle monitor removed because she got pardoned on January 20th, the night of the inauguration. Right. So, it's exciting stuff. So Todd, tell me, first of all, what's been going on in your life the last couple of years? I know you did some stuff with the Colorado GOP, as well as when I met you, you were running for sheriff of El Paso County. So, So tell me what's been going on in your life, kind of what your involvement is in Colorado politics, and what's going on with that.
Well, let's see. I spent 2 years as the vice chairman of the El Paso County Republican Party here in the Colorado Springs area. That was from 23 to, it would have been February this year, a 2-year term. Since then, I've been working with the state GOP, with the state leadership for the Colorado Republican Party.
Okay.
I was just appointed to the chairman of the bylaws committee. I'm sure that's very exciting news for all of your viewers and fans who have no clue what that is.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I have no idea what that is. Tell me, what does that mean? What do you do with that?
It's about as exciting as watching paint dry.
Okay.
So the party is governed by, think of it like all the enforceable policies for the conduct of the party.
Okay.
So.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of, skullduggery that can or cannot take place by manipulating bylaws, but it is the I would say the covenant that keeps the elected members of the party who do the party functions, keeps them together so that we don't stray too far afield of the intent and purpose of the party.
So when you say
called the law and order type of department.
Yeah. Well, when you say covenant, it makes me think of like a homeowners association.
Yeah, that's right.
So,
it's
so
not
something like that. Okay.
Not too far from that. Thou shalt do this, thou shalt do that, not do that, that sort of thing. These different decision-making boards shall be comprised of this many people, and they'll do this many things this many times of the year. Fascinating work, absolutely fascinating work.
Yeah.
24 years in the board for
Sounds really boring. Really, really boring. Yeah. So
riveting stuff.
Exactly. So you ran for sheriff back in, was it 2020, 21, 22? Okay. And it was a tight race, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, real tight.
Yeah.
Man, we got creamed.
Yeah, well, yeah, so you ran for sheriff, and then you got involved with the GOP the last couple of years. So, but the thing I really want to highlight tonight is the fact that you were with the U.S. Border Patrol. I got a chance to read a paper, an article you wrote here a little while ago called "The Fables of an Insurrection," kind of telling us a little bit about what happened or where you were at and how you were involved in the January 6th stuff in D.C. And as I read that, something was interesting to me that stuck out because for those of you who are listening, if you don't know, I was was there, and I was hit by a rubber bullet at one point, and I was just standing there. I'm talking to my son, I'm talking to another guy, and then all of a sudden I get hit in the in the leg with a rubber bullet, and it didn't feel very good. But the thing that I read was you were talking about, I think in one of your points here, to employ less than lethal force against another. That would be a rubber bullet, right? Less than lethal force.
Yeah, the less lethal.
The subject or subjects must be in most cases assaultive, or in other cases actively resisting arrest, depending on the type of force used by the officers. So
correct.
I think it's kind of interesting that I mean, I didn't know this at the time, and I didn't really care, to be honest with you. I was pretty naive when it came to that whole thing, and so I'm there just kind of paying attention to what's going on, watching all of these things happen, people getting hit by pepper spray and what do we call flashbangs or whatever they're Yeah, so
the flashbangs are just meant to really kind of disperse the crowd. Once I suppose I should give some background. During that period, I was an assistant chief at our national headquarters, which is at the Ronald Reagan building, which is right there on 14th in Pennsylvania. So, I mean, we could knock a golf ball into the White House lawn from there. Good 15, 16-minute walk, depending how frisky you feel, to the from our building to the Capitol building, right? So, now we're coming on the tail end of what everybody has called the Summer of Love. So the George Floyd riots that rocked this nation, really, for that entire summer. And of course, DC got a taste of this also. There was a lot of anti-Trump, during his first term. Unrest, civil disturbances in the DC area. And the Border Patrol being about 200 strong there in our headquarters, plus about at least that many more of other CBP officers from the team in blue that works at the ports of entry, the Office Field Operations is called, were called out. This is before I got there, but they were called out in, I think it was July or August, to go stand perimeter around the White House grounds when that one riot happened. This is the one where they accused Trump of taking a photo op to walk through peaceful demonstrators to take a picture at that church that had been lit on fire up Lafayette Square. So when I got there, I was assigned to the Incident Response Emergency Management Division, and my partner and we started working on equipping about, I think we just shy of 200 from CBP, so half Border Patrol, half Office Field Operations, who were mobile field force trained and equipped, meaning the riot squad. So we had the full kit, the full gear. We went through all the training to deploy those munitions, like the rubber bullets that you got hit with, all of the gas, the smoke, all this sort of stuff. Because we anticipated this was going to continue into the election cycle, which it did. So we were all set, ready to go, to be stood up. We got called in a number of times, never actually deployed force on force, but we got called in several times to stand, security around our building, plus a couple other buildings. I mean, DC's full of government buildings, right? But one thing that really struck me, and I think I covered this in that paper, is here you had a force of just shy of 200 federal agents, U.S. federal agents, equipped, trained to do exactly that for civil unrest, plus another, 300 plus federal agents armed who, maybe not be equipped and trained for exactly civil unrest to engage a crowd and disperse a crowd, but they're still armed federal agents who are lawfully present in Washington, D.C., and could be called on for assistance at, say, the U.S. Capitol maybe. But we were never, ever put on standby. In fact, we were told to stay out of the district on January 6th.
Interesting.
Don't bother come in. This is going to be a hornet's nest. And I thought, well, that's odd. Why would they want us not there? And so, kind of putting one and one together and realizing, because they wanted that. They wanted the narrative. This was Nancy, this was Schumer, creating the environment to get those imagery and the clips of some violent clashes with law enforcement on the steps of the Capitol. I think it was, if not well orchestrated, it was at least contrived, and to be the fertile environment to do that. Plus, you put in your own little groups of agitators to go force on force with the Capitol Police, and a lot of other people like your mom got rolled into this.
Yeah.
In a situation that they did this on purpose for effect, to malign not only Trump but the MAGA movement, if you will, and I would say the Republican Party writ large.
Sure. So I remember during that time, because I want to preface this question with something. Sure. There was, I remember the fence being around the White House. It was right up against the street. It's right across the street from Black Lives Matter Square, that they called it. And if you know the area, it's like literally right across. The fence was not even 100 yards from the St. John's Church. And,
so that's in Lafayette Park, yeah.
So go ahead.
No, as you say, that's the north lawn, the White House. That fence is right there on it. That would be Pennsylvania Avenue, but it's blockaded so that only pedestrian traffic can go in there. That's how it is, all the time. And then Lafayette Park, and they did fence off Lafayette Park after that.
Yep. So I remember being there. I think it was November. I can't remember if it was right after the election or right before the election. And there was another rally, another protest, whatever that went on there. Do you remember that? Were you there part of that one?
Yeah, there were several, one after the other.
Yeah. So the reason I bring this up is because I remember at one point we were staying at a hotel, maybe 2 blocks, just on the end of that, where they painted Black Lives Matter across that whole street. There's a Hilton, if you will. I think it was a Hilton, like right at the end of that street. And we were staying there, and I just remember the protest after that rally, and there was somebody that had gotten attacked on the way back. But I remember at one point outside of our hotel room, there was a blockade of it must have been police or border patrol. I don't know who it was exactly, but they had their blockade with their riot shields and everything, and all they were doing, just standing there. People were spewing hatred into their face, spitting on their shields and all kinds of stuff. And so at that point, you were not allowed, or they were not allowed to do anything, correct?
Yeah. You operate as a single unit, so when you're in those kinds of formations, you're not acting as an individual officer or agent. You're waiting for, the incident commander, that platoon leader, to give you instructions what to do. If one person goes off to make an arrest or grab something, it breaks the line. These are Roman legion tactics.
Yeah.
So you have to. The integrity of that line is important.
Yeah. So then the follow up to that I guess statement or question is when we were at the Capitol on January 6th. So it was almost like there was a line, because we were part of the first group of people that showed up there, and and so first probably a couple hundred people, to be honest, and I was just kind of following the crowd, and we get up towards the building, and there's a line of I guess police officers protecting everybody or separating everyone. And then it almost seemed, as the day went on, it almost seemed like it was a planned regress, I guess. I don't know if that's the right word, but
retreat.
There was retreat. That would be the right word. So, I mean, is that on purpose, or was that like a bad thing, I guess? Was that because they were trying to make it look like they were being attacked, or what was that all about, do you think?
So I didn't get up to the hill till after 2:30 in the afternoon. So I didn't get to see that first part. It depends, did they feel overwhelmed, or were they given orders to pull back to kind of let the crowd come through? And some of the footage that I've seen, it kind of looks like they pulled back really soon to cede the space to let people come into it, to get better footage,
Yeah. Well, that's what it seemed like. It almost felt like a planned retreat at the time.
Yeah.
And to me, I mean, of course, I don't, I've never studied much of this stuff, but it just felt awkward to me. Like it was like maybe 30 minutes, and then they retreated, and then another 30 minutes, and then they retreated, and then all of a sudden somebody went up in the bleachers, and then they retreated a little bit more, and then it just It was optics.
From the imagery, the footage that I've seen, I wouldn't argue that.
Yeah. Okay. So that brings me to what we're experiencing right now. We're watching, live on our Facebooks and social media and Twitter and all those things, and what's going on in LA. As I'm watching this, you can sometimes you have to weed through the garbage that you see and what's true, what's not. But the thing that I see is I see all kinds of Mexico flags. I've seen Palestine flags. I think I saw an Iranian flag. There's all kinds of different people protesting. And, look, we have a right to protest as Americans. But I think what I want to ask you is what is the difference between what's happening in LA and what happened on January 6th in Washington, D.C., especially for those that are listening and say, well, Michael, you protested and you got involved in a so-called insurrection. Well, maybe, but, if you want to think that way. But I want to know from your background what the difference is.
Well, I think the one in 2021 was contrived and set up to give certain leadership of the Democrat Congress, Democrat Party, a narrative to use to wield political efficacy against their adversary, the Republicans, and to maintain control and to avail themselves of certain authorities that ought not be used, which they did. It was to silence dissent, to strike fear, and really give the Biden administration kind of a one-up position to go after political enemies. So that's the difference. What's happening in LA is outright criminal, and it is insurrection. I would argue that it's seditious. If you wanted to cast another contrast between J6 and now, I don't know, what do we call this? The new Summer of Love V2.
I saw someone call it J.
Yeah, no kidding. Because June 7th, right? Yeah. So I'll go with that. J6 vice J7.
Yeah.
These are ostensibly foreign nationals interfering with, assaulting, attacking legitimate American authority. Yeah. The enforcement of immigration law is in fact constitutional. You can't tell me that it's this is wrong. What they're doing is illegal. It is absolutely legal. The Constitution is very clear, and so is the Supreme Court. Time and again has ceded or ascribed plenary authority for immigration law to the executive branch. In other words, the president, vis-a-vis the executive branch, vis-a-vis it used to be the Department of Justice, now it's the Department of Homeland Security, has sole responsibility and authority to enforce immigration law. There's no two ways about it. And for a state to try to intervene and subvert that, I would argue, is also seditious.
So that was going to be my question, because I've been watching, different things that Governor Newsom has been posting today, and also the mayor of LA, and they're saying Bass, right, they're saying, well, get out of our state, this is our National Guard, you don't have a right to do this.
Yes, he does.
Right, because the National Guard is supposed to be deployed by the states, which was kind of his argument, which was Trump's argument in D.C., correct?
Well, yeah, except in cases of the I word that they like to throw at you and your mom.
Yeah.
Now we actually have one. Oh, yeah. Perish the thought that the president of the United States then federalizes National Guard to execute federal law and retain order. The president, through the Constitution, has a responsibility to maintain order in the various states and protect the residents of those states. So are not people being brutalized and harmed and property destroyed and damaged by hooliganism? I mean, if the state of California wants to claim that as their right to do this, and these people are operating under their sanction or dispensation, I think they've got some serious problems with permitting that, and especially if it's being done to subvert the authority of the U.S. government. Yeah. Their argument fails on so many different levels, and it turns back and kind of bites them, really. But this is not unprecedented. The presidents have mobilized, federalized National Guard troops in the past. It is well within their authority to do this. One that I know Bush did it a couple of times, I think it was.
I think he did it in '92 with the L.A. riots the last time.
There you go. Yeah. Daddy Bush, right? But Eisenhower did it also to integrate the schools in Little Rock. He sent the 101st Airborne to Little Rock, Arkansas, with the Arkansas National Guard standing there preventing, these, it was 3 or 4 black kids from being, enrolling in that school or attending that school, sent the 101st in. The 101st handed the Arkansas Guard commander a letter saying, you're either relieved or you're answering to me. Well, we're answering to you. They turned around and let the kids in.
Yeah.
Under federal authority.
So the point is it's been used twice.
Yeah, of course.
That we know of.
Yeah.
Right. And, there's this argument that, these people have a right to be here, or these people have a right to a better opportunity. And I think you and I would both agree that, I think everyone has a right to a better opportunity, but I don't think everybody has a right to do it illegally. I think that's the point that I'm making. Right.
Well,
everybody should have go ahead.
The problem is that everybody has a right. Well, yeah, and this then crosses. You have to thread that needle of what coming here legally or not. What the past administration did was patently illegal, and I can point to chapter and verse in statute of where they violated federal law in doing this and releasing people who had absolutely come here illegally. To say that everybody has a right to the American dream, essentially, we're arguing now that the entire population of the globe has a right to displace to the United States. That's just not tenable. That's not sustainable. And the United States has a right to protect itself. That's it. I mean, show me anywhere that we've ceded any sort of statutory or constitutional authority to the rest of the world to come here. That's not how it works. Yeah, we invite and we welcome immigrants. There's a legal process to do it. And I would argue that there are 217 nations on earth that probably have similar rules and policies in place for bringing people in. I mean, Europe is suffering for essentially the same abrogation of their own right and responsibility to self-rule and self-protection. And, it's eroding places like England, Ireland, France, Germany.
Very quickly.
So
very quickly eroding.
Yeah, we have a right to monitor and control our borders. People have a right to apply for admission under various visa terms, but we have a right to adjudicate and dispense those opportunities as we see fit as a nation. And again, that falls under the purview of the executive branch, the president.
So you mentioned that you could point to, I think, the statute or whatever. I don't know the exact words that you use, but could you just explain that a little bit? Because I know you understand the Constitution like a lot of people don't.
Well, and this isn't this. I'm going to speak to Title 8 of the U.S. Code, which is Immigration and Nationality Law. Under Title 8, I think it's 1152, and then there's 1252. But initially, 1103 or 1105 assigns the Secretary of Homeland Security and the Attorney General as the enforcers of immigration law, and they must enforce Title 8, and they don't have a lot of leeway to pick and choose which lines of statute they're going to enforce or not. Under Section 235 of the Immigration Nationality Act in 1996, Bill Clinton signed that. And if an immigration officer like me or one of the people that we used to call customs and the immigration officers at the port, they're now CBP field operations, determined that someone is illegally present in the United States, we are obligated to arrest, detain, and remove them. There is not an option to just release them into the United States, which is exactly what Biden did through Alejandro Mayorkas. Totally illegal.
So tell me about, I don't know how much you followed it today, what's been going on in the last 24, 48 hours, but Governor Newsom told Holman to come get him, come arrest him.
Wish he
would. I'm not scared of you, something to that effect. I mean, is there something constitutionally that can be done in that type of a situation where Newsom is essentially just allowing and letting anyone come into the state and do whatever they want?
So it would be hard to charge, say, a governor for violation of, for allowing people into the country, because the states have absolutely no role in that whatsoever. That is entirely the U.S. government. CBP, Customs and Border Protection, has sole jurisdiction of that. So as much as you'd like to stick on Newsom that he let all these people in, well, no, that was actually his mentor, Joe Biden, and the auto pen who did that.
Yep.
So, but the problem that he has now is that he might be actually obstructing. That's under Title 18. I forget the I forget the section for obstruction. And possibly, I would argue, under 8 U.S.C. 1324, which has to do with harboring, concealing, aiding and abetting illegal persons in the country illegal. And I mean, we can point at Johnston in Denver and Jared Polis here in Colorado, of course. But if Karen Bass, Gavin Newsom, and any other host of elected officials and legislators or whatever in California who do pass sanctuary laws and enforce those sanctuary laws, I would argue that they're at a minimum guilty of conspiracy to violate 1324.
Wow.
By not allowing, saying you will not come in here and we will obstruct you, we will interfere with your enforcement of federal law. They're not obligated to participate. I'll give them that. They don't have to assist and aid in any sort of enforcement operations, but they absolutely cannot get in the way, and they cannot conceal or aid it or abet the escape or furtherance of anybody who's here illegally. It's a very clear violation of federal law, and I would point to Judge Dugan in Wisconsin as an example of that. And there's another judge in Las Cruces, I forget his name, who they actually did charge him with 1324 for harboring. So
what you're saying is there's a possibility. Yeah. So you're saying there's a possibility that they could be breaking the law by harboring it.
Well,
there could be a potential.
I know they are. It's just how, which U.S. attorney do you get to go file those charges? Now, if they want to say that they're aiding and abetting an insurrection, they might have just from what I've seen, which is clearly an insurrection, can they demonstrate, and mind you, we're talking criminal law here, so there's a very high threshold, a high bar of probable cause. When you get into a court, you need, beyond a reasonable doubt, right? Would they be able to prove to a jury beyond a reasonable doubt that they participated in or furthered or instigated insurrection? So
do you think maybe that right now there's a little bit of gathering of evidence happening?
I'm sure there has been for quite some time, especially on the immigration side with the sanctuary laws. If you ask me, granted I was just a lowly border patrol agent, but that's the clearest case. That they passed and enforced and enacted these sanctuary laws for years.
Yeah.
This is the culmination of that, right? This is now the culmination of the U.S. government is going to come in, and we are not going to respect these sanctuary laws that we never should have respected in the first place. And we're going to go in and we're going to enforce these laws. And if you notice some of their first cries of foul, and I will blame, every administration that I can think of back to the formation of Homeland Security, which includes, Bush Jr. and Obama, and maybe a little bit of Trump in his first term didn't quite get this one correct, is ICE. That other element of DHS, our sibling component, I guess, from CBP. ICE does all the interior of the United States enforcement actions. They have always been held on a really, really short leash, to where they had to articulate, beyond what was reasonable to make an arrest in the United States. And it was always this narrative, and from both sides, from the R's and the D's, that ICE was going to prioritize its operations and its efforts and its resources. They're going to rack and stack, and they're going to go after the worst of the worst. They're only going after criminal aliens. They're only going after gang members and convicted felons in the United States. Built this illusion, this false narrative that they have to be convicted, they have to be criminal in order to arrest them and deport them. No, absolutely not. You know what you need to be deported?
It is criminal to be in the United States illegally.
Well, some instances it actually isn't. So I'll point, and this is just a nuance that if you didn't go through like immigration officer training, most people don't know this. But if, for instance, in Boulder, last week, and in Boulder, an Egyptian citizen who was legally present, attacked people in that Run for Your Life, group. He was legally admitted as a visitor on a B-2, a non-immigrant visa. He overstayed. It's actually, it's not a criminal charge. It's administrative. He's illegally present, but it's not criminal. I mean, I've arrested, well, not as many, border crossers, but I've arrested, my share, several dozen, maybe 100 of visa overstays or just F1 students, right? Who are
So what happens? What happens when you arrest someone that's overstayed their visa like that? What do you after you arrest them? What do you
they
do?
go.
To pay for a flight to get back?
ICE
Or
does that. But
yeah,
all the removal stuff, that's what ICE does. But they
Okay.
generally don't even really get a hearing. You see,
Okay.
they get due process. Well, the due process was the visa application and the admission, where they said that they applied for admission and they were handed a piece of paper that said you have to depart the country by X date, that you're here with your passport and your temporary visa. It's depending on the country and what their application said. It might be 90 days, might be 180 days, whatever it is. There's a term. Once that term has expired and you violated it, you have no longer any right to remain in this country. And it's easier even than the illegal border crossers who Marcelo would say they're criminals for being here. And that's true. That's true. They violated, at a minimum, 1325 entry without inspection. God knows how many of them are actually re-entry after deportation was 1326, and that's felony.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's
So
the point. Because
let me real quick, Marcelo. Hold on. I want to just for you, those of you who are just joining, because Marcelo just jumped on. We've got Todd Watkins, who is former assistant chief of U.S. Border Patrol. Worked in D.C., has worked all over the country, and then we also have a good friend of mine, a pastor from Texas, Marcelo Duarte. He's a legal immigrant, not an illegal immigrant, but a legal immigrant, and so I wanted to have him jump on and give his take on what's happening. But go ahead, Marcelo, with what you were going to say.
Well, it was just that when Todd was explaining, we're talking about two different groups, right? When I'm talking about criminals, it's not the people who are overstayed because they are legally here and then they just overstay. That's, like he explained, is an administrative fault. But when you're coming in with no documents, no paperwork, and you just are in the country without any information about you, that's illegal.
Yeah.
And that was my point. That's totally different than when someone is just overstaying their visa, the type of visa they change it, and now it's a different visa. I totally understand that because when I came with the tourist visa, and then my company wants me to work. And when I start working for my company, I have to change my visa and all of those things. And to a certain point, when in 90 days I have to leave the country, or you present a letter of requesting for another 90 days. But after those 180 days, you do need to leave. If you stay, then you become like a administrative wrongdoing in the country, right? And that's what I was telling Todd. That's the difference between when I said criminal, is for those people who did not have any paperwork, right? And they just came in and illegally, and we have no records of who they are and where they came from or nothing. Just a board of entry. That's it.
Yeah. So you applied for adjustment.
Yes.
Yeah, and if that's not a completed thing, when that 180 days comes, unless you got dispensation to stay beyond it for that hearing, you have to leave. And that was the problem with this guy from Egypt. There was nothing pending. He didn't have any sort of permission to stay beyond that time.
Yeah. Well, I left with 200. I left it a day before and that thing because I didn't want it to be at all in the wrongdoing, because that will be negative for my application that was in the run, right?
Oh yeah,
so I left it and came back legally again at the right time, and then my paperwork were all done.
So obviously he was going to be sent back to Egypt, but then I think there was a federal judge that blocked his family being deported.
Yeah,
tell me what you know about that.
Weird with these federal district judges jumping in and joining the executive authority that's very clearly described. I'll be in all honesty, I don't pretend to know where they are deriving this judicial authority to interfere with something like that is clearly within.
It's clearly a violation. They don't even know what they're doing.
No, and of course we've in law enforcement, we've kind of learned the judge is wrong, but we're going to obey it so as to not find ourselves in contempt and jeopardize our own well-being and careers. And kind of you just sit and just say, this too shall pass. That's not going to withstand any sort of higher level review or additional review. These are temporary injunctions, TROs, temporary restraining orders. So they'll probably be dissolved once they're examined again. I think these are judges. Actually, I know these are judges that are doing this for clicks and likes, and they're doing activist stuff to appeal to to the.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Anything you want to add to that, Marcelo?
No, I agree
No?
100%
Okay.
with Todd. And I
Yeah.
really believe I missed the beginning, but I know that we are all in agreement that it needs to be done something. 100% in agreement with what Trump is preparing to do.
Yeah.
And sending all of the help needed to make sure that this thing needs to stop.
Yeah,
Because
if he caves to this, I don't think there's any turning it around. That we then are beholden to the vicissitudes of this petulant, recalcitrant, lawless mob, and they're going to dictate what laws will be enforced and when they will be enforced and where they will be enforced and on whom they will be enforced. So we can't cow to this. I think this may be heresy to say that. I think Trump erred in 2020 by not doing the exact same thing and sending in federalizing National Guard, sending in Title X forces to take control of places like Minneapolis, like Portland, like Seattle, like LA, like Philadelphia. Like I don't even know if our army's big enough to handle all what was happening then. But it was obviously he learned, right? Because they're going to try to run the same play, except the Trump team knows the play, and they're not going to let it get past him. But he's going to have to be very firm, harsh, if you will, and put this down decisively.
So we had a question. Somebody asked this on our Facebook Live. How do federal judges have the authority to overturn a president's orders?
Again, I will echo your listener's inquiry and say exactly that. How, in the name of God, does a district judge have the authority to overturn a president's order, especially an order that is firmly ascribed to the executive branch? Show me anywhere that it takes any sort of legislative concurrence or judicial oversight to execute those laws. It's fantastic. So I have to hope and believe that at some point the administration is just going to laugh at them and smile and continue on its way and let the judges cry. And
that's kind of what it feels like.
Yeah, and everybody knows that according to the Constitution, Article 3, which is the judicial, right? How many courts are prescribed by the Constitution? There's only one, the Supreme Court.
Yep.
Yeah.
That is the only constitutionally established court. All other courts, the Congress may establish whatever lower courts and however many other courts it deems necessary. So the existence of any of these lower courts, district courts, appellate courts, administrative courts, are completely at the mercy of Congress. I think I'd like to see the legislature come in and start, reining them in and putting them in their place and start removing some of these.
Sure, because it almost seems like they're just doing it, just like you said earlier, just for clicks and views.
Yeah. They want a moment to say, I stood on my ideological superiority.
Yeah, and because there's nothing they really can do.
They put them there, right?
Yeah.
So that brings up another question from the same person. Do you think judges are getting paid under the table to do what they're doing?
Man,
or should you leave that one alone?
That is maybe, who knows,
Maybe, yeah.
Honestly, I think so many of them have just reached a place of this, self-appointed moral authority, moral superiority, and they do what they think needs to be done, and they're put in these to do the right thing at the right time, and they seem to be the only ones deciding what that right thing is and what that right time is. I mean, if anybody's ever been in a courtroom, that judge is the supreme deity of that courtroom. They're like the captain of a ship, the pilot of an airplane. They are the god of that vessel while it's in operation.
And
so
most of them were put there for exactly that. Such a
exactly.
To do that agenda, to carry the agenda. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, 100%. So a couple of the questions here. I don't know if these would even apply. We'll look at here real quick. Someone was mentioning about some of the signs that we're seeing in LA and wondering if these professionally made signs, where they're being made at. If someone's making these signs, somebody's got to be paying for them. Can they track these people and track the money behind these to see what's going on?
You'd like to. I mean, there's no way that was spontaneous with all of the exactly what signs and flags. Everything, everybody rolls out there with a bunch of Pan-African flags, Palestinian flags. Where'd they even get those?
Yeah.
And signs. It was just like a instant insurrection. Just add water, right? Just throw a little money at it. So they were absolutely planning this, staging it. I'm seeing the black bloc attire out there now. So, Antifa's in this. It's looking just like the George Floyd stuff right now. You've got a lot of, I'm sure there are a lot of participants who are, malefactors anyway, that are out there who are true believers in, La Raza, La Mecha, La Reconquista and all that sort of stuff. But then you have a healthy dose of people that are going to make sure that this goes completely sideways, just like all of those, fake MAGAs at January 6th, right? That made sure that it just went way too far. And so that's where you get your Antifas out there. Who's it being funded by? I don't know. Isn't Soros always the easiest one to pick?
Yeah.
Half of the elected officials in California are funded by Soros anyway. Why wouldn't he fund the rioters?
Yeah. So I want to change gears here. I want to ask a question. We're kind of on the same line of thought, but what about someone who is involved in persecution in their home country? Maybe it's political persecution. I'm going to ask this to Marcelo first, but someone who's involved in either political persecution or religious persecution that has fled their country. Maybe they didn't come directly to the United States on any kind of a tourist or education visa or anything like student visa or anything like that, but they came to the United States. They flew to Mexico, let's say, and they walked across the border because of the stupidity of the last 4 or 5 years, and they walked across the border and they're here illegally because of that political persecution. Thoughts on that, Marcelo?
Well, for what I understand it, that if you come in at the port of entry, if you're looking for asylum, you want to look for the department that is going to help you with that. You're going to identify yourself and say, I'm looking for asylum. That is the situation that I'm living in. I'm being persecuted politically, religiously, traffic, drugs, or whatever it is. They wanted to kill me, and here are the proofs that I have. And the authorities there at the border will gather that information, probably hold you for a little while until they verify everything, and you're going to be welcome in the United States because you are applying for asylum. But if you're just coming in illegally and you're just living and then waiting for a situation when the one that we are happening now, for you to start claiming that you are here for asylum, no, you didn't request the asylum. You didn't prove that you need that. So I think it's totally wrong. When I was doing my paperwork in 1998, I had a pleasure to meet a few people who were applying for asylum. And it was the first thing that they did. For the port of entry, the first thing that they ask, they identify themselves and say, here, this is my situation. I'm claiming asylum, and here it is, all of that, the information that I could gather right now. And they just hold them, and from that, they do all of the due diligence, and they will find out. And then I met them a few years later, and everything was fine. They are American citizens now. So I don't see why people don't understand that. And it doesn't matter who it is, the president. It can be a Democrat or a Republican. That is the law. That is the Constitution. If you're coming in needing asylum, United States will help you. But you need to prove, you need to put all the paperwork, you need to show all the evidence necessary. But these people are just claiming something that it is not true. And that is the problem. And that's what too many people, we are sending people who are here for asylum. Are they really needed asylum? I don't think so. Because if they do need it, they will just be running to the authorities and asking for their situation to be looked into it. Am I wrong on that, Todd? Because that's what I might.
No, you're pretty. There's I can illuminate a little bit more the process, but yeah. So the United States is signatory to the Convention Against Torture, the CAT, which that's where we derive our asylum processes. But for the first part of your vignette there, one of the issues that I have had with this, and I saw this hundreds of times when I was working with DOD down at Peterson, is we did have a lot of people come in, and it's they claim that the first step in the process is called a credible fear claim, and that's how you get you open that door to an asylum hearing. And we would have people, travel from, say, the Middle East. They would cross the Atlantic, enter the Western Hemisphere in Brazil, and go through about 12 or 13 different countries over the space of, say, 6 to 8 months to get to the United States and then ask for a credible fear hearing. At what point were you no longer in fear of your life when you left Syria, and what's wrong with Brazil?
Yeah.
You could have asked for asylum in Brazil. You could have asked for asylum then in let's go through Syria to Peru to Ecuador to Colombia to Panama. Oh man, my geography! I got to get this right. Then to Costa Rica, Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala. I mean, come on!
You forgot Nicaragua.
Really? At some point there's. It sucks that people have to flee their countries. And I know it's real. I know I've met lots of them where they were honest victims of persecution, just exactly what you said. And the Convention Against Torture is exactly that. It's this, kind of organized, persecution of somebody because of political beliefs, ethnicity, religious beliefs, et cetera, et cetera. It's not because you had an affair with your neighbor's wife and now he wants to kill you, so now you're leaving and you're going to claim asylum in the United States. It's just that, but to Marcelo's point, he nailed something exactly right. They're supposed to be detained until they have that credible fear hearing by an adjudication officer who asks a whole bunch of questions to kind of discern whether or not this is likely true, if this person has a legitimate, likely to succeed hearing, a claim to credible fear. And then they go to see the next stage is then an asylum hearing before a judge. And this is all, if they came here without any sort of papers, they are amenable to removal. So they're put into a removal proceeding, but the credible fear claim and then the asylum hearings are then to neutralize that removal proceeding. And then they get the judge, if he finds in their favor, they send him a whole bunch of paperwork that they have to complete to get a visa under the asylum.
So I don't know much about that, so I want to ask this. So how long is that process?
It could take
someone
many months.
Is it like a couple? They could be. Is that where the whole idea with keeping people in cages came from?
No. And actually, that credible fear hearing should be. Geez, there was a limit to how long you could detain them before a credible fear hearing, and it was just a matter of days. Honestly, a matter of days. Okay. And if the adjudication officer found in their favor, then generally they're probably going to be released.
Just released into the country on a visa?
Yeah, an order of supervision, kind of almost like being on probation.
Gotcha.
If their credible fear hearing is negative, it's denied, then they go right back to the removal. They're detained until they're removed.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but kids in cages stuff, that comes, you'd have to do another story. You'd have to do another show.
Yeah, no, I figured.
That starts with Obama.
Yeah. So what's the is there a percent, do you know a percentage of people that get sent back versus that are let into the country when they claim asylum?
So it used to be when we had actual standards, it was Obama that lowered the bar for these credible fear hearings. And understand that this is gaming the system by our own government. That credible fear hearing is not a granting of asylum. It's just kind of a preliminary finding that this person should be allowed to plead their case before a judge. So what happens, and this is most of these people that came in during the Biden border dash, well over half, 60, 70% did claim credible fear. And to my knowledge, maybe 3 of them showed up because they were supposed to have that adjudication hearing initially, but there wasn't enough room. So they just let them all go with having just checked a box with Border Patrol. Yeah. I'm afraid to return to my country. And then they're released and they've never had an adjudication hearing.
Got it.
If there's an actual adjudication hearing, the people that are granted before Obama lowered the bar, most of those people came back because they were honest asylees, claiming credible fear. Obama changed it to where it was, domestic violence. I can't go back to Argentina because of domestic violence. Although I traveled through the entire Western Hemisphere to get here, and you probably could have just moved to the next town over in Argentina to get away from the domestic violence situation. But no, it's 5,000 miles later in the United States, and we're going to consider this as an asylum hearing. And mind you, although Obama was able to change the threshold for a credible fear approval, that did not change the law for asylum. So those people were going to be denied in court, and they didn't show back up.
So let me ask you this. What happens if, I think there's a difference between someone who goes to the border, right, and legally asks to have that how do you say it? I can't say the word. Adjudication, there you go. Adjudication hearing. There's someone that has that, but then there's someone who just walks across the border and now they're just here hanging out, doing their thing for, a year or two, and then all of a sudden they want to apply for that asylum or political persecution or whatever it is. Like, what happens to someone in that case if they now they go and they ask for that asylum?
So it was kind of the same. So like Marcelo said, you go to the port, right? You go to the POE. And you make your claim there. That was happening during Trump's first term. If you remember all the caravans that started in Honduras and Guatemala and came up through the Mexico. And so a lot of people were going to the ports of entry, but they could only say, we can only process so many asylum claims, credible fear claims per day. So they were turning people away. A lot of them just jumped the fence and waited for Border Patrol to come get them. They weren't running from us. That was the kind of the weirdest thing there at the end of my career, is to see, nobody runs from the Border Patrol anymore. They either sit there and wait for us or they run to us because they know what's going to happen. They're going to do exactly the same thing. They're going to claim credible fear, and then they're going to be released into the interior. So there you go. Same outcome, really.
Yeah. So which, Marcelo, you made a point to me earlier when we were talking on the phone about if you come across someone like that, what should you do?
Well, it's like the situation that you put it, like if someone is in my house. First of all, I would not receive someone who is illegally in the country, right? Second is if you are abiding, like if you are holding that person with you and helping them, you become liable for the exact same thing. So I really believe that we need to start abiding by the law. When we see something wrong, we need to be the citizen that it says and bring that to light. And most of the time, if the person really needs help, you are helping by bringing the law to know. So now you're bringing clarity to a dark situation. Make sense?
Yeah.
But if you just allow them to be staying here and then you're helping them, it's like, I don't think that is a help for nobody.
Yeah. So this whole thing in LA, I want to bring it back to this. This whole thing in LA almost seems like a civil war, because you've got a governor and a mayor of a state arguing that they're not going to abide by the laws. In fact, I saw a thing by, I want to say it was somebody in the sheriff's department or someone in the state patrol or something in Florida today say if this comes to Florida, I'm not going to follow any of Trump's laws. I think the response from, who's the governor down there? I lost the train of thought. The governor of Florida, DeSantis. I think DeSantis said something in response to like, you're going to get fired or something like that right away. But, it seems like it's almost like a civil war, because, you've got people, waving Mexican flags. And, if you so badly want to be here, why are you waving a flag from another country?
Well, because it goes back to that narrative of stolen land. I mean, this is just an unfortunate kind of confluence of a whole compendium of anti-American sentiments and ideologies,
that has been taught in school for the past, 8 to 10 years.
And they find a great home there on the western edge of the United States, where it's sunny and 74 and everybody hates the country. But hey, the dope is good and so is the serfs, And Marcelo's right. It's been taught. There's been this subversive bent that starts, back in the 30s and 40s, to kind of twist and turn higher education to secondary education. And it's that whole Frankfurt School and critical theory and all of its various
literally to hate
flavors.
The country. To hate the country, and it's like, if you hate the country, just leave, because you came from another country that you hated. So if you hate in here, just leave too. It's like, don't try to transform something that it is working for hundreds of years. Like, what's your problem?
Yeah, we stole this country. And the people who lecture us about having stolen this country are speaking Spanish, which is a European language brought by literal conquistadores who
Yeah.
conquered the land and actually did engage in genocide to purge the indigenous populations. But now you're going to run up here with your iPhone and American-made vehicles and American clothing, speaking Spanish, and lecture me about how we colonized this. You are literally speaking the language of the colonizer, the first and probably most brutal colonizer that the Western world has ever seen.
100%.
You definitely. You know, tell the listeners what you were telling me about language earlier, Marcelo. Like how you learned English when you were here, and what you were on a work visa.
No, but all it started because in Florida, I'm in Texas now, because it was becoming like a little. I speak Spanish. I speak 5 languages. But in Florida, you could not go to a store and be treated with English. You have to speak Spanish, and that will start bothering me. Like for passing of the years, it's like, okay, start at least just try it to speak the language. How long you're here? You just arrived and you are working? No, I'm here for 20 years, and you still don't speak English. It's like it's something. It is really wrong. But now DeSantis is doing a little cleanup on that too. Because if you are here for 20 years, even if you have your paperwork, but if you don't speak the language, you're not going to be able to be working and doing the things that is necessary. So
yeah,
I learned the language because I was working in a company and I wanted to be promoted, and my English was barely, but that was 3 months that I was here. And then I said, no, I'm going to learn the language. And then in 6 months, I started speaking in English.
Tell us how you learned English. I thought that was a...
So what?
Tell us how you learned English. I love this story.
Well, I bought the whole season of CSI Las Vegas and because I like the show, and I watched over and over and over until I understand it. Because it was one of the shows that had the best variety of things, so you could learn a lot of lingo on that. The grammar was really fast, and that gave me a lot of opportunity to learn different things. And for what I have been seeing, is one of the ones that gave you the best, like, in correct grammar. So it was nice and it was well spoken, and I did learn whatever I have right now. Enough to understand it and be understood. At least I'm speaking the language. I'm doing the effort, right?
Yes, I love it.
It's America. If your grammar is too correct, no one will understand you.
That's it.
Exactly.
It's kind of like if they taught us like really, puro Castilian Spanish, no one would ever understand us down on the border.
No, not at all.
Yeah. That's awesome. So Todd, where do we go from here? We've got, obviously we're in Colorado, Marcelo's in Texas, I think Denver's a sanctuary city.
I've been asked this a couple of times. Yeah, Denver for sure. My argument is and always will be that the entire state is a sanctuary state because of their 3 statutes that have been passed. And so no matter how much Colorado Springs or El Paso County may want to say we're not a sanctuary county, well, there are actually penalties now for any government officials who do not abide by those sanctuary statutes, which, by the way, are completely illegal. It's a bizarre situation. I would not want to be a policeman, sheriff's deputy in Colorado right now, because you're between a rock and a hard place between, violating state law, obeying state law, but violating federal law.
Yeah.
It's just, it's...
So what's the consequences of that? Do you know? Like if someone... If
a peace officer, which it would be your, deputies, policemen, cops, right? Peace officer. If you're a peace officer and you assist ICE, you'll be fined personally in your department $50,000.
Wow.
And you'll probably lose your post certification, your career, all that sort of stuff. So I look to California, and I hate to say this, but that needs to go all the way and be put back together under a very firm federal hand, and get the rest of these wayward states back in line. They don't have an option. There is no constitutional argument for imposing their own immigration ideologies by statute and policy. The federal government owns that. That's very clear constitutionally. It's very clear judicially. Did you know that the federal government could come in to Colorado and close every pot shop, seize all of their assets, and arrest those people for trafficking drugs.
Wow.
Let's
It
do
is still against the law. It is still against federal law.
Yeah.
Title 21
Yeah.
still
Yep.
makes that illegal. But the feds have not had an appetite to do it. I don't think that they ever will, because I do think there is a 10th Amendment argument there. As much as we may like it or dislike it, there's kind of a 10th Amendment argument there. Show me in the Constitution where, drugs, pharmaceuticals is where in the Constitution can you find a federal authority for that? I can't. But when it comes to citizenship, nationality, and national security, that's pretty obvious. That's really clear, man.
Yeah. Yeah. So what can we as, I guess, regular everyday citizens do? If the riots happen here in Colorado or in Texas, these big protests, what can we do, either to get involved or do we stand down? Do we speak up? Like, what do we do to, I guess, help the situation as opposed to hurt the situation and ignore it?
I don't think you can get involved. I mean, this is not, I mean, Texas is a whole other animal. I mean, I got to think that Texas is probably sending invitations to Antifa to please come down there and, go ahead and try that in Texas. We've been waiting for this, Need to check the zero on my new hunting rifle anyway. But in Colorado, where we are, honestly, stay the hell out of it.
Yeah.
I mean, you're only putting yourself in jeopardy physically and I think legally. Because where do you think, most of these DAs and the AG are gonna go with you trying to, mix it up with all these ICE protesters and that? They're going after. They're not looking for the MAGAs, really, right? I mean, I'm sure they'd love to if we wanted to show up, right? And then you just create a worse problem with trying to restore order. They're targeting the federal government. Let the federal government handle it. I think the federal government can handle it. Let them put this down. And let this fight be between, really, the state of Colorado and the U.S. government.
Yeah, we don't want any more Kyle Rittenhouses.
God bless him. He won that rightfully, but... I mean, that had to have been the worst, 2 years of his life. Could
have went the opposite direction.
Murder charges. So you as a citizen, I would not advise it. You may win the fight, but you'll lose the court battle. Yeah.
So in the grand scheme of things, what can someone do? Not necessarily with the protests or the riots or different things like that, but I mean, we talk about running for office. We talk about getting, like, what can anyone do? Is there anything other than that you would suggest?
Vote for the Republican. For the love of God, vote for the Republican.
Yep.
We voted ourselves into this. I'd like to think that we don't have to shoot ourselves out of it, that we could just let this play out and, turn to your friends who are maybe not as strongly conservative and say, we could vote our way out of this. We can change all of these laws and policies by putting the right people into these policy making positions. We've actually got to a place now, Mike Marcelo down there in Texas, lucky bastard. Where
you guys are welcome to come.
Yeah. I somehow managed to dodge Texas for 24 years in the Border Patrol. Now I'm thinking, that was stupid. Maybe San Angelo ain't that bad, man. Come on.
Yeah.
But we're in a place now where the police are going to be punished for obeying federal law. So you can't even have a scenario where, like, if I was sheriff, where I say, well, I'm going to help ICE. Well, yeah, me, Todd, can, but I sure as hell can't really expect my deputies, my employees, to do that, knowing that they're going to suffer for me grandstanding. Yeah. So I wouldn't do that to them, I would say, God damn, you're going to get out there and you're going to support ICE, you're going to help them. What? And get them fined and lose their careers? I'm not the one who's going to suffer there. I wouldn't do that to them.
Yeah.
This has to literally be a showdown between, 47 and Newsom and Polis and who's that moron over there in Illinois and Johnson. That the
I'm not sure. Yeah.
Yeah. It's maybe. Yeah. It's all this has to come to a head, and maybe California is the best place to start it.
Yeah. Maybe. So from a pastoral standpoint, Marcelo, what do we do?
Well, that's why I remember that I told you. You said, "Well, I'm thinking about going there to Los Angeles." Like, don't go. Do what you're doing right now. Just bring awareness. Just bring information, and that's it. I really believe that it's a point of a return right now, because the worst is happening there. I know you guys there are suffering in Colorado and so many other states, but the worst is happening there in Los Angeles, and I'm believing that Trump is gonna come with a decisive hand. Don't want to say using force, but I want to say with using the law and decisive hand and putting this thing to down. And that would be a great example for all the other states for all of the nonsense that is happening. And that would just going to give even more power and desire for all of the team that is with Trump to start organizing the rest of the states. Because like Todd said, it is federal. All the states need to abide. It's constitutional. But we needed a strong hand and a little bit of enforcement to this to come up together, and we've come back to be the United States of America, because we are the divided states of America, because we have all kinds of things happening, and we need to go back to that. And for that, federal, it needs to take their hand. For us as a believers, I really believe that we need to pray. We need to continue to bring awareness, like Todd's saying. At the election time, we need to talk to the people, those who are like in the fence. They're not exactly conservatives, but they are not liberals. We need to bring them. It's like, you know what? You made a difference. You can make the difference, because look at what is happening. I'm pretty sure that you're not happy with that either. So we start bringing people to vote correctly so we can make the change that it needs to be made. I agree with Todd when he said that. And that's our part. It's just pray and vote. We need to bring the right person and persons to those positions back again, because it's just a nonsense, brainless people who are there doing the most stupid things. So we need to take these people out.
Yeah. I'm reminded of a quote by a famous pastor, Martin Niemöller. I want to read this. Some of you may have heard this. And I think this is kind of what you're both saying. Just, use your voice. Don't get involved, physically. Just use your voice. Continue to speak truth and use it with your at the ballot box. But the quote is this: "First they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists. I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me." And so I think that's kind of where we're at, in a sense, is that, so many people have just, for decades, just stood on the sideline and said, "Oh, that doesn't involve me." No, this isn't the topic tonight, but, transgenderism and some of those different things that have been going on in our country, we just kind of let some of these things happen because, well, it didn't really involve me, and I don't know anyone who's involved in this or that or the other, so I'm just going to keep my mouth shut and let that be. Let those people do what they want to do. But I think we're at the point now where, it's almost they're coming for us. And if we don't continue to speak up, then something could truly bad happen.
Exactly what happened in Colorado. Remember that. Yeah, you guys are in this situation. I was in Colorado when that started, and we are all talking about that when we started allowing marijuana and everything, and people from other states coming, and now you're changing the population and the voting on those counties, and that's what is to start going down for Colorado.
Preach the gospel of being a good American. We've been there before, where it looked like they might come for us. I don't think this is it, but Colorado has certainly been passing laws that are going to come for us. When I say don't go out there, don't engage, don't go get your football pads and a Louisville Slugger and go take care of business on out by the Capitol. No, not that. That doesn't mean don't gather. Don't make some noise. Don't go out and preach the gospel of being an American. Get people to register to vote. Have your own events, but don't. I would not go, for direct action against
confrontational.
Yeah, it's not going to go well for you. Back in 2020, I attended one of those Back the Blue pro police rallies, and guess who came for us? Antifa came by thousands.
Yeah,
we stood our ground.
Yeah,
not saying don't be brave and don't stand up for yourself, but I would absolutely go looking, spoiling for a fight when these guys come out to do this, and that's not gonna, you're not gonna win that one.
Yeah.
just let them for us Texans. When they come here, we deal with them.
Yeah, what
Yeah.
was Lee? Robert E. Lee said sometimes the better part of valor is discretion.
Yeah. My dad used to have a saying, this is the kind of guy that will fight at the drop of the hat. Well, I'm the kind of guy that will fight or drop the hat just to fight. We don't want to be those kind of people. So, gentlemen, Marcelo, final thoughts?
Well, no, I think it was awesome. I hope that a lot of people start understanding a little bit more and don't be just talking, saying like, oh, it is so bad, all the deportation and all of this and that, why they are against this. They need to understand that there is a law involved and it is a breaking of the law, that it is happening rampant, and we need to stop. Because if we don't stop, this is just going to be a stepstone, just going to be a one more getting closer to the anarchy, to the total out of control. And that's what we don't want it in our country. We wanted to bring back the laws, and we want to bring back the peace that we always had. Like I said, the United States of America, not the divided states. And we need to start ending this thing. And I really trust that the federal is going to be on that fight.
Good. Todd, final thoughts?
Be good Americans.
Amen.
Love your country will love you back. A lot of us have spent the better part of our lives in service of this country. We've made mistakes. This isn't one of them. We're doing the right thing here. If Trump was out over his skis and was beyond the pale, the scope of his authority, I'd be one of the first ones out there saying you can't do that. That was absolutely wrong. But not here this time. Like Marcelo said, we need to bring this back to the United States. The United States of America. And this anarchic ideologies of some of these places is just, that's what is going to rent us asunder, not adherence to the Constitution.
Yep.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, gentlemen, it was a pleasure to have both of you on. I'm very grateful and very thankful for both of you joining us tonight, and for all of you who listened. Hopefully, we got to all the questions. If we didn't, I apologize, but hopefully we'll continue this, not necessarily with Todd and Marcelo, but we're going to continue the podcast here next week, same time, same station, 7:00 Monday night. Please reach out to us if you have any questions in regards to the topic tonight. Again, this has been the Taproom Podcast, where dialogue is always on draft and anything goes. So appreciate you guys being with us tonight. And until next time, bye for now.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Pleasure to meet you, Marcelo.
Thank you, Todd. Nice meeting you too.
Right.
Bye for now.
See you.